Sat in bed as a kid and listened to old recordings of Ole Miss games from when his dad played. And Peyton Manning, when he was 5 years old, was going to NFL games and watching Archie Manning run for his life for the New Orleans Saints and sitting down and watching and analyzing what teams were doing to stifle his dad and talking to his dad about it, and he was around it 24/7. Andrew Luck is a wizard of a mind. He goes to Europe and he looks and reads about old buildings. And his father, Oliver Luck, was a quarterback that not only played in the National Football League and played under Archie Manning, mind you, but Oliver Luck then went and ran the World Football League, and Andrew Luck went with him to Europe. And as a young age, he is sitting in boardrooms of football franchises and teams and Board of Regents and all of that, and he's studying the game, and he is a Stanford-level intellect as it is. And I'm not saying Anthony Richardson's not a smart guy. It doesn't matter whether it was Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Bo Nix, whatever young quarterback Indianapolis was going to last year hand the keys to. I think you can look and potentially think this. I think it's now, to me, becoming more clear. The puzzle is starting to come into place if you're to look back on where there may have been error. Not malice, not ill intent, but error in the development of the quarterback position for the Indianapolis Colts and why they're in the position that they're in now. When you hear Tom Brady talking about that, when Anthony Richardson was brought into the league, he was brought into the league with an owner who is a football guy through and through, and rest his soul, Jim Irsay, who loves football. And Jim Irsay, who has pride out the wazoo, like a fatherly pride about Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. And human interest dictates that we fall into the trap of just assuming that because people were around are one way, that other people in the same realm are going to be the same. And because Jim Irsay, over the course of the last 30 years, has essentially known two franchise quarterbacks who themselves were already just conditionally taught how to understand and read football, when Anthony Richardson came in, I think the Colts basically said, this guy is so offensively, athletically gifted that we are going to teach him all the things to help him read through progressions and work on his footwork and know when to tuck and run. And they taught all of those things, but where they erred, and I'm not saying this factually, I'm not saying for certain this is the case. I'm not trying to indict the Colts, but in hearing one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time talk about what made his development different and unique and what was advantageous, it had nothing to do with teaching Tom Brady how to run the position offensively speaking. It had everything to do with Tom Brady learning how to understand the defense he was going up against and knowing the defense is better than those that were playing it against him. Just like Indiana, knowing the offense of their opponent better than the offense that's trying to run it, Tom Brady was able to line up, look across the defense, and say, they're trying to take away this short slant. They're trying to take away this running back flare, and that opens up this area of the field. And how many times did you see the New England Patriots because we don't like the Patriots, we don't like Tom Brady. How many times did you see Tom Brady just when you thought a play was dead, and then all of a sudden he finds Julian Edelman for what turns out to be a 28-yard gain and should have been a 2-yard loss? Or he hits Danny Woodhead, or hands off to Lawrence Maroney, or whatever it may be, and you get or Gronk for that matter. But because he understood what was trying to be taken away, he then was able to take advantage of what was not. And I think what we are seeing with the Colts is you now have a situation where Daniel Jones is your starter, because when Anthony Richardson came in, they had a defensive coordinator who was simply trying to figure out his own defense. And I don't know this. I'm just going off assumption and tea leaves. But it would be my observation that there is the possibility that defensively last year the Colts were so in disarray of trying to push whatever buttons they could to get their defense jump-started and going that there's no way they had time to then split that information and send it over to the young quarterback and say, look at this look, look at this look, look at that look. So what do you end up with? You end up with a quarterback that has all of the offensive gifts that you could ever possibly ask for, but is limited because he doesn't understand and read a defense. And that doesn't make him a bad guy, and it doesn't make him a dumb guy, and it doesn't even make him necessarily a non-capable guy. It makes him the typical quarterback in the NFL because it's a complex as hell league. Totally different than than college football. When you get into the National Football League, the windows are shorter, the speed is faster, and the looks are completely different. And I think what we are seeing now is that you have a young quarterback in Anthony Richardson where the Colts erred in the way that they tried to develop him because they focused too much on teaching him one side of the ball, and then that was stifled, even if he had mastered that, in the fact that he didn't recognize the other side of the ball. And then you get a blitz that comes in a preseason, and he gets hit, and his finger goes sideways, and then before you know it, now you're behind the eight ball once again. And I never thought of that. I never thought about the fact that perhaps the best way to groom a quarterback, you look at franchise quarterbacks in this town, there basically been 3 of them. Since the Indianapolis Colts came from Baltimore, they have had 3, if you want to count Richardson, 4 franchise quarterbacks. Jeff George, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. Those are the 4 that you had that were drafted within the top 5, and it was like the keys to the kingdom are being handed to them. And in Jeff George's case, you had a different offensive coordinator for every year that he started out, like every year he was in Indy. There was no stability. And they were constantly trying to teach him an offense. And as a result, I don't know that they were ever sitting him down and saying, look at the defense. Now, one thing, Eddie, I will say, and I never thought I'd say this. And you tell me, Eddie Garrison, feel free to disagree. The first year, he was not good at all. But I've watched now, one game and then a couple of excerpts like that, and I think Tom Brady as an analyst is really, really good. Because he finally learned how to just speak to the – too many people speak into the language that only they know. And Brady was doing that a year ago. He was looking at games and trying to analyze them and get jumpy, and he was speaking in languages that I'm like, I have no idea what this guy's talking about because I'm not an NFL quarterback. Now that he's been able to step back a little bit and speak things into a more simplistic term, I think he's really good as an analyst. And I know people here don't want to hear that, right? Because we don't like Tom Brady.
I still need to see it more, Jake. I was not overly impressed with Brady last year. I didn't think he was overly insightful. I thought he was just too casual.
That's what I mean. Last year, that's what I mean. Last year, he was too casual because he thought that just simply saying, right there you see Cousins. He's going up against a double safety blitz with a corner over the top. He was too casual about it, not realizing that the vast majority didn't understand what he was saying. So then I think he worked really hard in being more explanatory of the basis of what's happening and speaking it more to the layman term language. But I think that's what we're seeing. Now, Daniel Jones, in terms of this particular team, we're going to see on Sunday whether he's able to carry over what we saw from him. I thought he was really good in week 1, and I thought part of that was Shane Steichen. So the other side of that is offensively still you have to cater to what your offense can do or what your quarterback can do. And we'll see whether or not they're able to maintain that, so to speak. All right, when we come back, it is, as I mentioned, it still feels weird to say it's a college game night, but it is. And then the big one on Sunday between the Colts and the Broncos. But what is it about Denver that might present challenge for Indianapolis? We'll get into that. We'll do it on the other side here. Query & Company, you're listening to it on a Friday edition on The Fan. So here's what we know in terms of practice for today. Eddie Garrison, do you happen to have, please, the breaking news sounder? Shavarius Ward, which this was not a surprise at all because he's been in the concussion protocol. He did not practice today, correct?
Correct.
Now, the other one, Eddie, that's a little bit of a surprise.
Which pretty much means that he's not playing Sunday.
Correct. And this other one, was it limited or out for today?
So he was limited on Wednesday, out yesterday, out again today on the sideline.
We're talking about Liatu Latu.
Yep, hamstring injury.
So he is out for today, right? And that would assume, one would assume that may limit him coming up on Sunday. And, of course, trying to get to Bo Nix, the offense and the quarterback for the Denver Broncos. Now, as for what Denver presents, I think defensively, we talked to Brandon about it yesterday. It's a defense that is kind of Denver's calling card. I do think that offensively they have, could you say that Bo Nix still to this point is a game manager? Probably. I mean, Cortland Sutton is probably their primary receiving threat. But defensively, I still think that, and it's interesting because the Broncos for a long time as a franchise, and especially with Sean Payton, you bring it in there because you are wanting eventually for them to be a more potent offense. But I think defensively, what they bring to the table is going to be the thing that the Colts have to really worry about. But the one thing that I keep going back to is when you look through, you just don't know. Like in the NFL through one game, you just don't know. And, I think the Commanders are pretty good. But offensively, did you watch that game last night, Eddie?
Oh, painfully.
There are games that you go through where you're waiting for it to jumpstart, and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and it just never got going, right?
Yeah, that's simply, I think, because for Washington's, because with how much time Terry McLaurin missed during camp, and your top receiver not being out there, being on the field, and working on stuff with Jaden Daniels, and they mentioned it last night in the broadcast, Jake, that Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin have had to spend extra time after practice just to try to get back in sync with one another. And right now, the offense for them is not in sync, and it's in large part because of that. And maybe there's some, more film in terms of stuff that they want to do offensively with Cliff Kingsbury that teams are catching on to and taking away.
If you look at the Denver Broncos and defensively, Vance Joseph, their coordinator, do you know what they like to do more than any team in the league? Do you know what his statistical pattern would show you? They love to dial up blitzes.
I was about to say blitzing, yeah.
They like we're going to stack guys up front, and here it comes. They are bringing the heat. Now, what's interesting is, what did the Colts just do offensively last week against Miami on every possession?
Scored.
Correct. And what did Miami consistently try to do? They tried to blitz.
They did try to blitz, yes.
And Daniel Jones was really good against that blitz. And so much of that, I know that I absolutely beat this horse, I realize. But so much of that is because of their escape route, so to speak, the escape hatch of getting to Tyler Warren, and I know Josh Downs they didn't overly involve in week one, but getting the base hits instead of trying every time for the home run, you have to get in rhythm. I've said before, what basketball games did you play in the driveway when you were a kid, Eddie?
21.
Did you ever play
knockout?
Did you ever play horse?
Horse, around the world, pig. So
any of those games, if you're playing horse and your shot, you just have a day where your shot's not going. Eventually, you kind of pack it up and you're like, you know what? I've just got to get back to the free throw line. And you hit a couple of free throws. I remember my dad telling me when I was a kid, the one thing when you're going against a team that has a great shooter is do not get them on the foul line. Because you get a shooter on the foul line and they hit a couple of free throws, and then all of a sudden they feel their rhythm. And I know that Chris Ballard has talked about making the layups. I get it. And I know that you get tired of hearing making the layups. But Tyler Warren, Josh Downs, the short level or intermediate level offensive plays become the layups. And what the Colts and Shane Steichen did really well for Daniel Jones was, especially with Warren early, they got him to the free throw line to let him get comfortable. And then once you get to the free throw line and once you get comfortable, then that allows you to get a rhythm. And when you do have to dial up long, you have a little bit better feel about you. But when the blitzes are coming and you don't have a lot of time to make a lot of changes, or you've got to get rid of the ball quickly, and they did do a good job with that. Now, the offensive line played really well. I think the most underrated aspect for the Colts in week one might have been their offensive line. I mean, I thought it played well, and Jones had time and could pick and choose. But he did a very good job of finding where his safety net was. And if Denver is going to bring that heat and they're going to blitz all the time, then Daniel Jones is going to have to kind of keep it in that range. But you feel good about it. Don't you feel better right now? And this is, again, I get it. I mean, it's Daniel Jones is the quarterback of the Colts, and there's really not a lot of reason for us or me. I can't speak for Kevin. I can't speak for James. I can't speak for Jeff. I can't speak for John. But for me, I still, and I don't know how long this window goes, probably one or two, as long as they're winning at least, I guess. You know, you look at where they might have missed with Richardson. Eventually, if Jones plays well and that continues and becomes a cycle, then you just put that to bed because you're like, hey, you know what? They might have missed on Richardson, but they hit on Daniel Jones, and so all's well that ends well. But since we're still wading through that a little bit, then I think you still look into that. But in the case of Richardson, I think they went too much Adam Dunn home run ball and not just kind of sticking with the basics because they just were never able to get into that flow. Part of that's availability, you know, all of those things. But what's the point spread in this game? Do we know, Eddie?
Denver 2.5.
Denver's given 2.5.
They are 2.5-point favorites.
Is that a disrespect? That surprises me a little bit because I think of these two teams, frankly, after week one, I think of Denver and Indianapolis. I think most people would tell you that they think of the Colts and the Broncos. And I know the Broncos had a better year last year, but like you think of them as two teams that are thought to be kind of in that same area. So tie goes to the home team, right? What, 3-point spread? So basically they're saying if this were in Denver, it's a 5.5-point game. Maybe that's right if it's in Denver, but like I would say 3 either way. I think most people would see this game as there are some offensive questions still for Denver. There's some offensive questions still for Indianapolis. Now, the Colts defensively without Liatu Latu, you know, and you have a healthy scratch on your defensive line that was a top 3 pick.
I'm not sure yet, Jake. There was a week last year when he had a hip injury, didn't practice all week, and then suited up on Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he does go. But if he goes, if he's physically limited, right?
You have to remember JT Tuimoloau, who was just a second-round pick for the Colts.
The healthy
this
scratch,
past year
right?
was a healthy scratch
That's
last
what I mean.
week. So
you have a guy there, but again, is that asking a lot to just plug him in? I don't know. I'm also intrigued by something else that's going to happen tonight, and it doesn't involve high school football, although Kyle Neddenrip does join us in 45. I'll let you know what that is, and we'll discuss exactly that and what to look for later. We'll do it next. Tell you what I'm intrigued about. I'm intrigued about the Indiana State game. Partially because, just the aspects of, and JMV probably knows more about Indiana State football than I would, because I would assume that he's paid attention to their, they're 2-0, right? And they've won both their games. They beat Eastern. What's that?
I was about to say they beat a Division II school.
Well, they beat Eastern Illinois, which is basically a Division III school, right? I mean, isn't Eastern Illinois currently, I could be wrong here. Didn't Eastern Illinois just go through some stretch where they didn't win a game in like 2 years? I could be totally wrong in that. Or am I thinking of Western Illinois? I might be thinking of Western. Eastern is where
Western's the team I beat 77-3 last year.
Eastern is where obviously Tony Romo went, right? And Jimmy Garoppolo also went to Eastern Illinois, did he not?
Yes, you are correct.
So Eastern may be a decent program, but Indiana State beat them. But the Sycamores come in at 2-0. To your point, Eddie, week one they beat a team that they should beat, and I don't buy into these things, but I always think it's an interesting barometer. If you go on to like ESPN, it has it, what it always says, like percentage odds, like I guess fans vote on who's going to win, whatever. It has 99% that Indiana's going to win.
Yep.
Now, has there ever been a game where it says 100?
I don't think so.
Is there, who would it take for it to be a 100? I mean, you can't, right?
I think there's always going to be some statistical anomaly in there where it's going to be like, 0.0000001%
right
chance, that DePaul defeats Alabama.
And I think this is what, to me, is interesting about this game. And I don't mean to discredit Indiana State by speaking the Indiana side of the narrative. But Indiana, when you look at it, is expected to obviously have a big year. Now, are they a playoff-bound team? I think their schedule this year is a lot more arduous than it was a year ago. And I think they have good players. Certainly in the running game, they've been able to mix it up where they've got three guys that all look like they could be a primary back for them. In the passing game, I think to this point, especially in game 2, Mendoza kind of took the step. He talked about how he wanted to feel more comfortable. He looked at it in game 2 for certain. And Indiana has done, and last year did, a really good job of getting a lead, building on the lead, compounding the lead, and just putting games away. Oh, they're up 7. Oh, they're up 14 now. Wow, they're up 17, and just et cetera. And that, Curt Cignetti's blueprint there carries over. But for the Hoosiers this year, if you look at their schedule, I think there is a more pressing need for them, not just to win these 3 games, which they should win between Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State, but also to figure out and work on their depth in the areas. Like these are, and this is going to sound like a disrespect to Indiana State, but these are 3 games that if you're going to play 3 games that for all intent and purposes at the end of the year are going to do nothing in terms of your resume build. And yes, we live in a world now, I realize it's not the BCS, it's not bowl games. When there is a college football playoff selection committee, it's like the NCAA tournament in a much smaller scale, but you've got to start looking at good wins, bad wins, test your schedule, etc. And if Indiana is going to go into it under the thing of we're going to play games that are going to get us wins and go with 3 between Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State, presumably you're going to go 3-0. Then what you have to do in those games is use those games to solidify yourself, not in the area of the guys and the players you know about, but figure out any question marks you have about your team and your style and work those kinks out before you get into, because then it gets real. At Iowa, I don't know that Iowa is – what do we say about Iowa? Kirk Ferentz teams are always a team that every 3 to 4 years he gets a senior-laden team that's a 10-win contender, and then, they go 7-4 every other year. And this year, if I'm not mistaken, they just lost to Iowa State. That was a close game. Iowa State's pretty good. So at Iowa is a tricky game because it's on the road. But you start out with Illinois at home, that offensively particularly looks really strong. Then at Iowa, and is that a trap game? Because after Iowa, you got to go to Oregon. And Oregon's probably going to be undefeated and a top 4 team at that time. And then you get a little bit of a reprieve. I mean, Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, you should win those 3 games. And at Penn State. But I just think tonight, the problem with it, Eddie, if this makes sense, is this feels to me like a game tonight that you got a lot to gain. Well, let me rephrase that. You don't. If you win, what do you gain? But you have a lot to lose if you don't play well. Right?
46.5 is the spread, Jake.
What is it?
46.5.
Okay. Be honest. What? 46.5.
Mm-hmm.
What are the odds? Who would you take in that?
I don't. I would take Indiana.
You think Indiana? I mean, that's hard to argue. Because here's why.
Well, I didn't specify which one, did I?
Yes.
I said I would take Indiana.
Well, one's Indiana, the other's Indiana State.
Both Indiana.
Understood. But if you are on vacation and you attend Indiana State and somebody says, where do you go to school? And you say Indiana, what school? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's my point. But here's the thing. So if you look at it and you say, okay, Kurt Cignetti's MO, though, this is why I would take Indiana in that. Because isn't Indiana's MO kind of once they get a lead, they just keep going? I don't mean that they run it up. I don't mean like in a classless kind of way, but they just keep running their same stuff. We're not, you know what I mean? And before you know it, you go from 7 to 14, and now you're up 17. 46.5.
IU total points 53.5. Indiana State total points 6.5.
Okay.
Basically betting Indiana State to not score a touchdown.
Okay. Now that seems unfair, right?
Either way, if you take the spread or if you take the over-under, obviously.
I'm not some big gambler. But 46.5. So let me ask you this. Do you think Indiana State?
Basically, the book is telling you, or asking, do you think Indiana will win 49-0?
Indiana State can get themselves, can they not? Even if you're going with fluke. A fluke touchdown and a fluke field goal, right?
Look at that first game of the year for Indiana. They give up two 70-yard touchdown runs.
So let's just say that Indiana State gets an Indiana State, I mean, look, I'm not trying to disrespect them at all. If they get a touchdown and then later in the second half, Indiana fumbles the ball on their own 20 and Indiana State gets it, and let's say they lose 2 yards on every play. And now they're facing a 4th and 16 from whatever it would be, the 28-yard line or whatever it would be. I'm not going to do quick math. But either way, you kick a field goal then. Now you got 10 points. So Indiana then needs 57 points. 57. You got to take Indiana State, right? You don't seem convinced, Eddie.
Sorry, I think I'm just trying to make sure this is right before I share it on the radio. Hold on.
Are you doing math? That always becomes dangerous for all of us.
No math is involved. This is just simple research.
Well, you have 21 hours a day for the simple research. Eddie is intently staring at the screen. By the way, Zach Osterman going to join us just about 15 minutes from now, and we'll break down whether or not Indiana can get to 57. All right, what's your research, Eduardo?
Did Eric Dickerson have a son named Eric Dickerson Jr.?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because I was just looking at the box scores of these 2 Indiana State games. The first one against McKendree, Eric Dickerson Jr. is on the box score for Indiana State. That's why I was asking.
So you're saying, wait a minute, so you're saying Indiana State has a player named
McKendree.
No.
By the way, do you know what state McKendree is in?
If it's in Texas, then you've got pretty good odds.
No.
Illinois.
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Where is McKendree?
Sure. It's in Illinois, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what you do is you go to their – did you go to their football website?
I did.
Did you go to the roster?
I did.
Did you go to the bios of players?
I did.
And for Eric Dickerson Jr., does it say anything in the bio about his father being a Hall of Famer who was one of like 4 backs to run for 2,000 yards and was the sideline reporter for Monday Night Football?
Bio, 2023 played 11 games, 2024 played 11 games. That's it.
Under personal, you know when it usually says like son of Don and Cindy Dickerson, because he's clearly the son of Eric Dickerson if his name is Eric Dickerson Jr. But one would assume that if his father is that Eric Dickerson, like I would have it plastered right on the front of my website, right? You know what I mean?
This Eric Dickerson Jr. is from Louisville, Kentucky, so I don't think so.
Yeah, that rules it out right there, right? Zach Osterman going to join us about 15. You're going to a concert at some point?
Yes, shockingly enough.
Why is that shocking? Are you not a concert guy?
Not really.
Why not? Although admittedly, it's only been in the last 5 or 10 years where I've really started to enjoy concerts. But for what reason are you not, per se, a concert guy?
Well, most of the artists I listen to no longer go on tour.
Really?
Yeah, like 80s and 90s classic rock. You don't see many of them on tour anymore. I don't see Bon Jovi on tour.
How about Van Halen?
They don't go on tour anymore. And even if they did, it's not the same because R.I.P. Eddie. Skypoint.
David Lee Roth, I mean? How about David Lee Roth? You're right. Without Eddie, Van Halen is not the same. But David Lee Roth, you wouldn't want to go see him? He's doing cruise tours, I believe, right?
Sammy Hagar guy, Jake.
Okay, fair enough. I'd like to thank those who have texted the show, by the way. Gentlemen, enjoy your show. Bit of a vocabulary nerd, so a random observation. Jake uses the word prognostication, but pronounces it prognostication. Prognostication. 3 O's and 1 A, or 2 of each. Which gives, and can we reinstate the third O? P.S. Really appreciated the Dropkick Murphys tickets that you comped me. All the best from Rich. Rich, you're probably right. There are a couple of words that I have always had a weird pronunciation issue with. I don't know why.
Boise?
Because I was an English major. What's that?
Boise?
No, it's Boise. That's B-O-I-S-E. It's Boise. You say Boise. It's not a Z. It's an S, right?
Boise State?
Fair. That kind of the way the one S slides into the next, your mouth just kind of creates it that way. But I do probably say, now that I think about it, prognostication, and it's prognostication. That's fair because it's a prognosis. It's not a prognosis, right? You would say prognosis is this. So that
prognosis is this show.
What's that?
This show is a prognosis.
Fair. When I was forever, I used to say naivety.
Yeah.
And it's naivete, which is weird because isn't it spelled just T-Y? But I always pronounce it naivety.
Like Hilton?
And it's naivete, right? The other one, I'm trying to think. Oh, this one has always befuddled me.
Befoodled?
That would also be good if I did that one wrong.
Yeah.
We've done this one before. A Schwinn is a brand of what?
Bicycle.
A Harley Davidson is a brand of what?
Motorcycle.
So why is it motorcycle but bicycle? Same suffix.
Because there's a motor on the motorcycle and there's no motor on a bicycle.
No. Okay, but a bicycle is simply implying that there are two of what?
2 cycles.
What's that?
It would be 2 tires. So by 2, yeah.
2 what?
Cycles.
Okay, so why is that not a bicycle?
It's not I.
You just said there's 2 cycles. Bi becomes the replacement for the word two, so it should be bicycles, right? So why do we say bicycle but motorcycle? It's the same suffix. The suffix is the exact same. Cycle is still the word. Zach Osterman going to join us a couple minutes from now. I also mentioned those, and you can always text the program at 239-1070. That's 317-239-1070. I'd like to thank Gary, because Gary is a loyal listener and never denies the opportunity to let me know he's listening. Usually to disagree with me, but nonetheless, Gary is listening, and I do appreciate it, Gary. And we do our best. I appreciate, and oftentimes Gary's critiques are fair and valid. So it is appreciated, and I appreciate the interaction. Eddie, you had mentioned that the Fever will be playing on Sunday in, I'm going to say befuddled again, in an arrangement from a scheduling standpoint that does, in fact, befuddle the pre- and post-game host of the Indiana Fever broadcast to an extent, correct?
A little bit. Just a little bit, yeah.
So the Fever playing at 3 o'clock against the Atlanta Dream, and that is a game that is going right up against, obviously, the Colts and the Broncos eventually, because that is a 4 o'clock hour kick for the Colts and Broncos. And so the Fever, that game, that means what in terms of the radio broadcast?
All coverage for Colts will be right here on the Fan in 97.1 Hank FM starting at, let's see, it's not 10 o'clock because it's not a 1 o'clock kick. So what would that be, 5 hours before or 3 hours before kick? So we're looking at 1 o'clock coverage on the Fan, 1:30. And then Matt Taylor and crew will take over at at 3:30. Man, I cannot talk today.
Okay, so, but what we know about the Fever playoffs,
Fever
would
on
be the
IBC at 2:45.
the Fever will have their home game in the playoffs in round number 1. This is a best of 3 with the Atlanta Dream, who they, over the course of the regular season, played 4 times. They split. Each team won twice. This layout then, Eddie, in terms of home and away matchups, lays out how for the Fever in the postseason.
So obviously Sunday is in Georgia. Tuesday is in Indianapolis at Gainbridge Fieldhouse at 7:30. Game 3, if necessary, will be Thursday. Time to be determined.
So there is one guaranteed home playoff game for the Fever, and then obviously if they win the series, they would move on from there.
That is correct.
They changed this, I believe, partially from, wasn't it a year ago, when the Fever got in and had to play Connecticut in a best of 3, and the first 2 were on the road. And you're like,
Yes.
wait a minute.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Like, why would you play a best of 3 and the first 2 games are on the road, and then if you're the underdog, you get the critical game 3 at home?
By the way, naivete is spelled Naivete, not with a Y on the end. Thank you, Michael, for pointing that out. And again, the interesting aspect of that when it comes to the spelling aspect of it, there was a naivete on my behalf. But I said naivety forever. Absolutely forever. Jake, I just wanted to drop in and say hi. That would be the always enthusiastic and the very best Airport Jimmy, as he was known on a former part of this program, and I always called him Caffeinated Jimmy, because Jimmy, who lives in Florida, still listens to the show, and that dude is a constant. You meet dudes like this where you just meet people, and you're like, you know what, that guy's just with the program. I've always said 2 kinds of people in this world, those with the program and those that aren't. And if you're with the program, you know what I mean. You meet people, and you're just like, that guy's with the program. Or gal. Just certain people, you're like, they're just cool. They're with the program. And Jimmy's one of those guys, like, I met the dude, and 5 minutes later, I'm like, I felt like I'd gone to high school with them, felt like I'd grown up with them, felt like I'd gone to concerts with them. And he was just, and he used to call the radio show and was, like, always energetic. And I'm like, you are Caffeinated Jimmy. And Caffeinated Jimmy listening to us, thank you for texting us as they are driving through the fabulous, fabulous state of Florida and enjoying the sun down there. We were talking about Indiana and Indiana State and the point spread of this particular game. The Hoosiers a 46.5-point favorite. And I think still we have a good idea about Indiana because of what they were a year ago and because of Curt Cignetti. But at the same time, you know, do we really know this year's installment? You've got a lot of new faces, a lot of new positions. I thought that in particular, as I talked about, Mendoza wanted to be more, by his own words, in rhythm in game 2 than in game 1. And Indiana State comes in having defeated, I mentioned Eastern Illinois, I mean Sean Payton, who's going to be here on Sunday. Maybe he'll go to the game, right? Not to see Indiana State, but to see the team that just beat his old team because he's an Eastern Illinois guy. But joining us now on the guest line, he is, of course, with the Indianapolis Star. He is our friend Zach
Osterman.
Thank you, who joins us. Zach, are you on your way down to Bloomington, or are you already there?
I'm always here. I never leave.
You know what? I don't know why I was thinking you lived on the south side of Indianapolis. I didn't realize that you live.
I live on the south side of Bloomington.
Okay, well, that's cool.
You know,
Do you
the
live,
far south side.
Do you live on the lake, by the way? That's the way south side, right?
No, I don't go quite that far south, but we are firmly in that direction.
All right, fair enough. Let's begin with this. This game, and I know it sounds crazy because of the year that Indiana had last year and the fact that they seemingly still have their foot on the accelerator, although key faces in new key areas or new faces in key areas. So let's begin with this. Do we know more about Indiana or Indiana State in this game?
I mean, I think that at least for our purposes, I think we probably know more about Indiana, but I think we always recognize that, I mean, that, like, I've been calling this 3-game stretch of preseason basically all year, and that this was, it was always going to feel a little bit like that, where you felt like you could maybe glean certain things. You wanted to see certain relationships forming. You wanted to know, is the improvement here real? Did they figure out the defensive line rotation? What do they look like in the secondary's been remade, all this kind of stuff. But we all knew, kind of like an NFL preseason, you're not going to come out of it just sort of being able to say, my mind has been completely made up about what this team is and what it's capable of. That's only going to happen in the games that really matter. I understand college is a little different. These games matter. If Indiana were to lose tonight, that would have all kinds of ramifications over the Hoosiers, playoff candidacy and whatever. It's not like losing an NFL preseason game in terms of being risk-free. But I think it is in terms of just sort of judging the wider trajectory of the season, frankly.
Do you, with Indiana, Zach, and I was talking about this earlier, when you have these 3 games, and I mean this as no disrespect to the opponents, but Curt Cignetti has been so outspoken about, just the way that they have managed the scheduling. Is there an extent to these games where it actually is about more your depth than it is rhythm of your starters? And learning your depth and getting repetition of your depth and making sure that you are kind of getting all bases covered. Is there any aspect of that in these 3 games?
I think it's personally a split of both. I mean, Cignetti said himself the reason that he left his starters in longer than probably we expected him to against Kennesaw State was because he said a lot of these guys maybe they've played a lot of football, but they haven't played a lot of football together. We need these snaps. We need this rhythm. On the other hand, I think a game like tonight, and I've written this week, I think the flip side to that is this is your last meaningful chance, assuming you can get to, and you want to be respectful of Indiana State, but assuming Indiana can get to a place where it's comfortably ahead in this game by maybe mid-third quarter, this is your last meaningful chance to get a lot of younger players who you might need down the line, quality snaps in game. Okay, maybe the score's decided, maybe the game's decided, the score's lopsided, whatever. But I mean, the example I use seemingly every year is whether it's because of injury or coach's choice, Indiana hasn't started the same quarterback through all 12 games of a regular season since 2018. Even last season, I think, fans kind of forget Curtis Rourke. He only missed the 1 game, but that was still a meaningful game. That was Washington. It was a conference game. Game day was in town. It was an important step. It wound up, frankly, being one of Indiana's better wins, all things being equal last season. And if you don't get Alberto Mendoza maybe some meaningful snaps tonight, if you're able to, well, then he's going to come in all that much less experienced and less confident if, heaven forbid, at some point his brother gets injured, goes down, you need to call on Alberto. You also look sometimes at young players, Elijah Hardy, who's one of Indiana's starting linebackers, a great example. He made a bunch of plays in what we would probably generously describe as garbage time against Western Illinois last season, against Purdue last season. But those were things that he built on. He was able to come out of the season and say, hey, maybe those games were long decided, but I still had the pick six. I still had the strip sack. I still did this and this and this. And that gives me the confidence and the momentum to go into an offseason where I wind up coming out the other side with a starting job. That process for young players can start here, to your point about just sort of seeing, like, what does your depth look like? Sometimes guys won't really be able to show you until they get on the field for a drive or multiple drives or, 20, 25, 30 snaps. I feel like maybe that balance shifts. Kennesaw State's the game where you leave the starters in a little longer. You want them to have that rhythm. You want them to have that time on task. If Indiana can get to a place where this game is comfortably in hand, I think maybe that balance shifts a little bit for Curt Cignetti tonight.
Speaking of balance, Zach, and maybe the time is now for Indiana, and maybe Curt Cignetti was the perfect guy at the perfect time. And let me explain what I'm talking about. And maybe this is getting too into the weeds, too far in a conversation for another time. But I have kind of on the periphery monitored this, and I want you to tell me how even accurate it is. College football now that we have NIL and everything else, I mean, this is essentially a semi-pro league. And it really is up to schools and, a lot of different aspects as to how much they want to spend, how much they want to buy a roster, etc. You have revenue sharing within the Big Ten, which was the forefront leader because they came up with their own television network. It catapulted it into the elite league. It allowed it to get the coastal teams in Washington and Oregon and USC and UCLA. And now you have Ohio State, who is the empire of the Big Ten, coming out and saying, this is all well and good, but if we are going to rake in all this money with television deals, then we need to make sure that those that are bringing in the most money are are also the ones that are getting the biggest slice of the pie. And that is going to change and shift the way that the Big Ten is balanced, because if you now all of a sudden have to pay Ohio State based on performance more than you're paying Northwestern, etc., that expedites the necessity to get into the upper echelon of the Big Ten, and Indiana needs to make sure they're at the front of that table. Is that like a way over nuanced way of looking at it?
No, I don't think it is. And listen, I mean, I wrote something about this today. I think everyone's written something about it. I think I've written a couple stories about it in the end. What Ted Carter said to my colleague Steve Berkowitz over at USA Today this week. On the one hand, I think it should kind of be caveated by saying,
And by the way, Ted Carter, the president of Ohio State, for those that don't know.
Yes,
right?
yes. He said, we are a member of the Big Ten, and that's where we plan to stay. He said, it doesn't matter what I think. He said, he was clearly kind of tepid in all this. I mean, I would say even somewhat reluctant. The quote that I think got seized on was one, and I don't have the story right in front of me, where he essentially said, that's a conversation that will probably be ongoing around the next media rights deal, which will be renegotiated ahead of 2030. The current media rights deal expires at the end of the 29-30 academic year. I thought the most interesting thing he said in the other direction, because if you want to counter all of that sort of quasi-defense of Ted Carter, he was the president of Nebraska for 4 years. He's been the president of Ohio State for a year and a half. He's not a novice to this. He knows what it's going to say to people when he says what he does. And I thought the bit that was most interesting was when he talked very pointedly about Ohio State's television performance and Ohio State's brand, and that, the schools that bring in that kind of TV audience should be rewarded for it in some way, because that is essentially what comprises the bulk of the revenue sharing model the ACC went to keep Clemson and Florida State sweet when they were exploring trying to get out of the conference. The ACC, I think it's 60% of your revenue share annually is determined on a 5-year rolling average of essentially your television performance. How many people are watching the games you're playing on TV? And so the more you're on TV, the more popular you are, the more money you're getting. And I think we can all understand why the ACC did that. It could not afford to lose those schools. It had to give them financial incentive. For so long, the Big Ten has not had to do that. If anything, the Big Ten's parity has sort of underscored this sense of harmony that was seen as one of the Big Ten superpowers. That Big Ten schools always moved in lockstep because there was a financial parity that, okay, Ohio State's going to make more on a football game day than Northwestern. But the conference, in terms of what money is earned by a collective effort, the conference is going to treat everyone equally. And right now, the only schools that aren't on equal shares are Oregon and Washington, because they're still being phased in. The idea that could be re-explored is, it is meaningful for a couple of reasons, and I don't want to get too macro. One is the obvious, which is, to your point, if we do get to 2030 and the next TV deal winds up paying schools more money, if they're on TV more often, if their games are being watched more often, then yes, you need to be better at football. That's just the plain and simple truth of it. You need to have a number next to your, people say polls don't matter, but we all know if you got a number next to your name, you're a lot more likely to grab, the casual viewer on a Saturday afternoon for an hour. There's also kind of a macro piece of this, and this is where we really do get into a philosophical discussion that I think is dangerously sort of bottomless at the moment, because there's no theoretical bottom to it, is the questions over a super league. And because when you have Clemson and Florida State, they can look at the ACC and say, well,
Zach,
yeah.
And my apologies, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Zach Osterman, our guest from the Indianapolis Star. I have always felt, and I've been saying it for 10 years, and you probably heard me say it, with you on the radio. Like, I call it the Hat World League. And the reason I say that, you go into a Hat World or Lids or whatever the name of the hat store of your choice is in Butte, Montana. And you go in there, and whether you're in Butte, Montana, Jonesboro, Arkansas, or Portland, Maine, you go into a hat store like that, and from a college standpoint, they're selling Notre Dame, Ohio State, Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, Texas, UCLA. There's the same 20 schools that are just big-time brands. And I am convinced that eventually we're going to get to the point where those 20 brands are going to come together and say, what are we doing here? Do we really want to be like bankrolling Northwestern and Wake Forest? Let's just do our own deal and sayonara. Now, I thought that 10 years ago. I don't know that I go there now just because the money is being so distributed throughout because of NIL and boosters and everything else.
I've talked to I talked to some people that are smarter than me in the TV space, and for years they've all kind of been Super League. The future is Super League. What does that look like? Is it 20 teams? Is it 24? Is it 32? Is it 40? Is it just the Big Ten and the SEC leaving everybody to pick the bones off what's left? But they've all said Super League. I will say that one or two that I've talked to more recently have started to question whether the money will be there, whether there is, because ultimately for 10 or 15 years, cable TV was an ever-expanding revenue stream. That is beginning to contract. And instead of making pie, like if we're going to torture this metaphor, instead of being able to make the pie larger and larger every time a conference came back to renew its media rights deal, the pie's not getting bigger now. The question is basically, how can we carve off larger pieces for the brands that matter the most, the Big Ten, the SEC, at the expense of the brands that matter a little bit less. And then the ACC will get more than the MAC, and the Big 12 will get more than the Sun Belt, and so forth. This is a deep oversimplification, but there is a larger sense in which this is what killed the Pac-12. There is, I think, a growing curiosity over whether there's actually enough money out there to convince Ohio State and Michigan to say, you know what, we have a lot more in common with Alabama and I don't know, USC than we do with Northwestern and IU and Illinois. So we're just going to go play football with them. Now, I think what maybe the Super League idea is starting to transform into is something much more Big Ten, SEC, plus possibly Notre Dame. But again, this is all very sort of theoretical. And what makes Ted Carter's comments this week, I think, particularly relevant is Clemson and Florida State have a lever they can pull that might kill the ACC, but it doesn't kill college sports. If Clemson and FSU say, hey, we're out, well, they'll just go to the SEC, or they'll go to the Big Ten, or they'll get a sweetheart deal from the Big 12 because the Big 12 is desperate to have a couple of big-time football brands, whatever. Ohio State doesn't have a lever to pull. Ohio State doesn't have another league to go to. It's not going to go independent. The only red line Ohio State has to cross is to say, if we don't get what we want, we are going to spearhead the formation of a Super League.
Right.
Now, I am a fan of a longtime fan of European soccer. European soccer powers have been threatening a Super League for 30 years. And they've come close a couple times. The closest they ever came, the backlash to the announcement was so swift and universal and forceful that the Super League didn't last 72 hours before almost everyone backed down. That doesn't mean that they'll never try it again. I'm just saying and again, this is a conversation we don't have to get into today because it would be an hours-long deal. There are so many more parallels between European football, its structure, its culture, its history, its dynamics, and American college football than any other American sport. And that's why I do point to this whole, like, hey, we all fear a Super League. We've been fearing a Super League for 30 years in European football, and it still hasn't happened. Now, it has been, a stick to walk into negotiations with when we want to expand certain things or change revenue distributions, and that's, I think, probably more of what Ted Carter was sort of floating a bit, a little bit of a trial balloon for this week is like, hey, what happens if, at very least, I say this just to make sure that when we all go back to the table in 2030, Ohio State gets one of the plushiest seats. I think that's maybe more kind of what we're talking about. But listen, to your point, if we do go to that place, what is almost certainly going to determine the bulk of a school's annual media rights revenues, the bulk of a school's annual cut from the television deal, is going to be how often they're on TV and how well they perform when they're on TV. And that means being better. It means being better at basketball too. We shouldn't forget that. That's still $1 billion business, but it means first and foremost being consistently better at football.
Listen, the Big Ten deal, UCLA coming in was entirely because the Big Ten wanted USC for football, and USC wanted basically a travel partner, for lack of a better phrase, or a regional partner, and USC piggybacked their way in. The fact that UCLA piggybacked their way in off of USC. The fact that UCLA is a rich basketball program was a benefit, but I don't think was a driving force in UCLA getting into the Big Ten. This is all of this power stuff is based upon football and football revenue. But conversation probably more expansively for another time. Tonight it is Indiana State. Zach Osterman will have all of your coverage with the Indianapolis Star, and joining us on very short notice today is appreciated. Zach, enjoy it, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, as always.
From the Indianapolis Star, our buddy Zach
Osterman
joining us on the show. All right, speaking of that publication, by the way, it is time to take a look at the action that is taking place tonight on gridirons around the state that does not involve college. So Kyle Neddenrip joins us next. When you think about that conversation of college football and superpowers and power conferences and all that in Ohio State, every league, every conference has their blue blood programs, and then everyone has the program that is just like a no-name brand that seems lost and clueless, and it's like I can understand why the Ohio States would say we're not going to give that kind of money to the lost and clueless club within our particular league if we're the ones that are bringing it all in. But we shift from talking college football now to the high school standpoint.
Speaking of lost and clueless, we bring on Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star.
That's right. Kyle Neddenriep joining us now on the always busy and very active on this Friday guest line. Kyle, there's some big ones tonight, man. How are you?
You did it on purpose, huh? I can tell.
we have that bet. Hey, listen, you said it, not me, right?
That's right. It's my voice, so I'm
right.
to blame.
That's right.
Yeah, big games. It's a really kind of a rivalry week, so to speak, with the Mudsock game tonight, and
that's
Brownsburg
and
Avon.
Fishers, by the way.
Right, Brownsburg and Avon, and the Hendricks County game, Chittard and Cathedral. So you kind of go down the list. There's quite a few of those type of games tonight. So it'll be a fun night. A lot of good games. A little bit hotter than it's been the first few weeks. So kind of a throwback to August. It feels like tonight. So it'll be fun.
There are always in college football. There's always a weekend that they call Separation Saturday, right? Where it's that you really find out who's for real and who's not. In high school football, are there any games tonight that you look at, Kyle, and you say? And there's one that I have in mind, but I'm not going to lead the witness here. A game that you look at it and say, these are two teams or programs that we always assume are good, but perhaps tonight is where we really find out the separation between the two. Any games jump out?
One I'm curious about is Carmel and Louisville Trinity, because Carmel has been so good these first few weeks. And then, we always know Louisville Trinity's, one of the best teams in the Midwest, and they're ranked number 1 in 6A in Kentucky. So going on the road to play that game, I think will give us an even better, even though they're out of state, normally I go the opposite way. I think the out of state games are sort of like, we don't know who these teams are, but
right.
So it's hard to have a measuring stick. Louisville Trinity is sort of the opposite. We pretty much know every year, and they play a lot of in-state teams anyway. So I think that'll be a great test, especially to go away and try to win that game. And I noticed all the Kentucky people were picking Trinity in their predictions. So it would be maybe a slight upset if Carmel could do it, but another great test for them. I think that'll be one of the more interesting games. There's probably some others, or maybe another one you're thinking of as well. But I think there's a few that way. But that's probably the one I was there's a lot. HSE Fishers will tell us a lot too, but that one kind of stuck out to me a little bit. Like, oh, how good is Carmel? I think we'll find out tonight.
Okay, then the one that to me I'm curious about, because they're two programs that historically you always think are great programs. And you could look at the record of Ben Davis and say it's a down year for Ben Davis, but then you look at who they played, and for me it's like I still want to see one more test, and they're going to get it tonight with Center Grove. Now, is there a clear disparity between these two teams?
Yeah, although Center Grove is battling some injury situation, they lost Drake McClurg, who's their standout receiver. I know, running back, they've got an injury as well. So there's a little bit of I do think Center Grove is the better, more experienced team this year, and their record so far and what they've done so far kind of bears that out. Ben Davis is a little bit. They're definitely young. I mean, they're starting a freshman quarterback at 6A, which is hard to do. And also the sort of the news this week with the MIC bringing back Center Grove and Carmel is sort of even though this doesn't count as a conference game, it's a reminder that these teams will be conference teams again, Center Grove and Ben Davis, and obviously two of the premier football programs traditionally in the state. They've played some. I've covered a lot of the games between these teams in the past that have been very memorable. So cool that they're back in the same conference again. But I think Center Grove's probably the right now is the better team. But yeah, Ben Davis will. They're not going to go anywhere. And I guarantee by the end of the season they're going to be a team people don't want to play.
Was that a Metropolitan Interscholastic Conference decision, or was that a Carmel and Center Grove decision to go back?
It was mutual. I mean, everybody has to agree on that. And, I think between, gosh, I had a lot of conversations with people, even off the on and off the record, I guess, about, kind of 3.5 years ago, what has happened in the time since then. And, I think it's for the betterment of both Carmel and Center Grove and the MIC. When you only have 6 teams, just you're down a couple. You want to have a conference, you want to have probably 8 teams is ideal, and you got 2 teams sitting out there as independents that are having a hard time scheduling, and even down to the middle school, having to travel and do those things in middle school is not ideal. So, I think it was mutual. And the MIC wouldn't have voted in favor of it if they didn't want to have those schools back. So I think it's for everybody's benefit. And definitely had been hearing some things throughout the summer that probably led you to think this could happen eventually. And I think for the betterment of everybody, I think it's going to be good, to have them back in the mix. So, but yeah, I think it's both.
One of the games, I mentioned each week, Crystal House is the team that I'm going to spotlight each and every week because it's, a smaller group of kids that are working hard. They've got Crispus Attucks tonight. That's a 7:00 kick. I wanted to ask this, Kyle, because I think it's, I've always enjoyed these schools, and that is among the IPS schools, the one that so far through, the first, I guess, gosh, hard to believe already quarter of the season, but the team that jumps out at you where you say, you know what, from an IPS school, that might be the best one so far this year.
Yeah, I think Attucks is probably that team, and they're kind of they're going to have a new stadium they're going to be playing in pretty soon, or a refurbished stadium that looks pretty cool. That's a long time coming for sure.
Yeah, they had a lot of problems with literally the foundation of the stands, right? Weren't they having it needed. Yeah. In other words, this wasn't like just some cosmetic. This was a necessary upgrade for them.
You literally couldn't watch games there anymore. You couldn't. It was that bad. I went over and did a story on one of their girl shot putters, discus throwers. She's one of the best in the state, and I was just over there, kind of looking around and it was just, so much needed to be done. I'm glad, it's finally happening, and it's going to be a good. It's going to look great, when it's all completed. But yeah, I was looking at their schedule. They lost to Lutheran in week 1, a very competitive game that Lutheran ended up pulling away and winning. But then they beat Tech and Tinley the last 2 weeks, and then going down, I was looking next week. Purdue Poly, they both could be undefeated next week playing each other. That'd be 2 4-0 teams. And then you look at the rest of the schedule, and I'm not sure there's another game. I think they could maybe win out and be, potentially 8-1 going into the sectional, which is. They're in 4A, which is tough. The IPS schools, they don't have the overall numbers of players a lot of these 4A teams do usually. But so you're battling an uphill battle against schools like Roncalli and Chittard in that same sectional. But if you can go 8-1, that kind of shows, Attucks has definitely got their program going in the right direction. They've been very competitive these last probably 3 or 4 years, so it's been a program on the upswing. But yeah, you're looking at what they've done so far, I think they're probably the team that stands out the most.
So tonight, Kyle will be at the Mudstock game. That is the Hamilton County rivalry game between Hamilton Southeastern and Fishers. And if I'm not mistaken, Kyle, even when in years that there has been maybe, seemingly on paper a disparity between these two teams, this game almost always comes down to a crazy finish, doesn't it?
Oh man, so many times. Almost every time I've covered it, it's been like an overtime or a play at the goal line, or something wild that happened. I can't imagine it won't be that way tonight. It's one of the unique games. Just you don't have a lot of district, especially at this size of school. Teams, kids that went to school together. It's basically like brothers playing against each other in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's gonna, it's almost always comes down to the wire. The crowds are enormous every year, and I think it used to be week 2, and they pushed it back a couple weeks. But it's always one of the best games on the schedule. The red versus the blue, and the colors of the stadium's really neat too. So yeah, it'll be a great game. I can't imagine it won't be a field goal type game either way, or touchdown game either way. They're both competitive this year anyway, but it's just the nature. Like you said, the nature of the series, it's almost always a crazy close game.
High school football in Indiana, I'm telling you, it's pretty awesome. And between the kids, the local communities, the support, the lights, I love all of it. And Kyle Neddenrip will have all of it covered. Kyle, appreciate the time as always. All right, enjoy the games tonight.
All right, guys. Thanks, Jake.
Kyle Neddenrip joining us from the Indianapolis Star. We come back, kind of a rehash of a story in relation to Indianapolis that suddenly and quietly went on kind of the back burner. All of, literally it was in the forefront, and then seemingly as quickly as it was a conversation, it's kind of faded away. But is it about to come back? At least on this show, it's about to. I'll explain next. By the way, no Jalen Jones. We know that. Going to be out a while for the Colts.
No Charvarius Ward. Jinx.
Owe me a Coke. And Liatu Latu did not practice today with a hamstring injury. We will see about his availability as the Colts and Broncos get set for their matchup, Lucas Oil Stadium, coming up on Sunday.
Shane Steichen did say about Latu that there's a chance that he'll be on a pitch count.
Well, it's like they're playing baseball.
I know, right?
There was a lot of discussion. I just mentioned Lucas Oil Stadium and the fact that the Colts and Broncos are playing there on Sunday. And I don't necessarily need to get into my typical rant about a multi-purpose stadium and the financial dollars that went into it. I just saw recently an article about the amount of money that has been spent now in U.S. cities publicly subsidizing new stadiums. And there's now kind of this wave of people coming to their senses about that. Truthfully, in this building, it's not like I take a survey on it, but Rob Kendall, I know, has talked a lot about this. He and I have talked a lot about it, just about public tax dollars and the necessity or lack thereof for sports venues. And it's hard because I work on a sports station. And so I certainly understand what sports mean to this town. I think I've been, worn that on my sleeve pretty heavily. But the talk about an MLS team. Now, apparently, because someone texted in and asked if we were part of this, Eddie, and I have heard of this, there was like a focus group or a survey that took place recently, again in Indianapolis, about the viability of an MLS team in Indianapolis. And I think this is interesting because this was a ubiquitous storyline, I don't know, like maybe last spring. And in a short version of it, you have in this town the Indy 11. They are owned by a business owner that is predominantly in the large construction building business. They began building their own complex and retail and business and stadium park just to the west of downtown in the old Diamond Chain facility. The problem is not only did you have some environmental question marks because of the Diamond Chain and some of the stuff that was left behind of residue there with that, but also that is the grounds of one of the original largest cemeteries in central Indiana, the Green Lawn, I believe it was known as cemetery, from like 100 years ago. And by state law, when you begin building something, if you find any remnant of human remains, you have to stop everything. I mean, understandably so. And I think they kept that happen on more than one occasion and made the excavation and then building of that park a challenge. In addition to that, during that process, the news came out that the mayor's office of Indianapolis had had meetings with the MLS, Major League Soccer, and that the MLS had said, we would have interest in Indianapolis, but we would prefer with a different ownership group than that of the Indy 11. I'm not saying that factually, but that's been reported. It then appears as though the mayor's office began kind of a survey amongst people in town and had conversations with the ownership group of the Pacers and Herb Simon of the possibility of building a soccer stadium just to the east of Gainbridge Fieldhouse, in an area that the Simons would not have ownership in, but they facilitated a conversation between the city of Indianapolis and a potential investor, I believe an English investor, that would be able to give money and buy into an ownership group for an MLS team in Indianapolis. Now, what I think people are a little bit naive to is the amount that it would cost just to pay the entry fee. You're talking upward of probably $500 million or closer to even into the $1 billion range just for the expansion fee to get in to the MLS. And then on top of that, whatever it would cost for a stadium. And to bring it full circle back, I would be all for a soccer team in Indianapolis. I would be all for even more sports venues in Indianapolis. But it is my belief that the days of any of that coming at the cost of $1 out of my pocket are done, because we spent $720 million on a stadium that we were told was the one-size-fits-all, end-all, be-all, never ask for my dollars again. My point being, I think it's interesting that this conversation of Indianapolis and professional soccer was ubiquitous 6 months ago, and as I'm saying it right now, most people are probably saying to themselves, you know what, that's right, I haven't heard about that in forever. Like, what happened? And I don't know where things have stalled, but it's almost like that conversation just kind of vanished. I think it'd be awesome. I think it'd be cool. And I know that there are, soccer is a sport that I'd put it on. I'm not an avid fan, but, I mean, you know how long a game is going to be when you go into it. There's nonstop action. You know it's going to be 2 hours, and I know young people like it, and there's no doubt it has increased in popularity versus 20 or 30 years ago. It's been the sport of the future since 1978. But it does seem that now it is more in the American culture than it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago. But where it stands with Indianapolis, I simply find it interesting that it's gone from vocal conversation to now kind of whisper. Saturday, that meeting tomorrow, it is Purdue and USC, and they're going to honor the Rose Bowl team from 2000. One of the guys that not only was a great player on that team, not only was nationally recognized, he was the first to win an award that might actually give a little bit of glimpse into what is a key offensively for the Colts on Sunday. Tim Stratton joins us next. I get the impression, I have no idea. I've never met this next individual. I watched him play a lot of football, and that was a team in an era that I was covering Purdue. And Tim Stratton was a fabulous player for the Boilermakers, a 3-time first-team All-Big Ten performer. He was the inaugural John Mackey Award winner for the best tight end in college football. He caught passes not only from Drew Brees but Kyle Orton. He climbed a goalpost once. I have no idea, but I'm going to guess Tim Stratton probably is a Green Day fan. I don't know why I think that. I just think that. Tim Stratton joining us on the program. He will be honored along with his Rose Bowl teammates tomorrow at Ross-Ade for Purdue and USC. Fact or fiction, Tim Stratton, Tim, likes Green Day.
Tim used to like Green Day until they got political. Then I stopped. Yes. Uh-huh.
So college Tim Stratton liked Green Day, correct?
Correct. That is correct. I was a fan.
Okay, fair enough. Now, if it makes you feel any better, and you and I have never met, but college Jake had an internship in New York City and met this chick and thought everything was going great. And then in 1994, and she told me that her boyfriend's band was coming for the weekend, so she couldn't get together. And it turns out her boyfriend's band was in Green Day. So Jake also used to like Green Day and no longer does.
That's awesome.
That's fair, right?
Yep.
Hey, let's get to this, and that is, when I think back to this team that's going to be honored tomorrow in that Rose Bowl team, we talked to Seth Morales yesterday in the Holy Toledo play against Ohio State, and it just was such a fun group to watch play. And now you get a chance to go back and be honored for the 25th anniversary. First off, does it feel like 25 years ago?
There's times where it does and times where it doesn't. I guess it depends on how my back feels when I get up in the morning. But it's going to be great to a lot of the guys that are coming back in. I now have my daughters that are been active in sports. I have a collegiate volleyball player now, so I told the guys that when I was coming in, I go, I'll be watching the game on the field, but I will also probably be watching my daughter's game on my phone at the same time. So. It's just a different dynamic now for a lot of us.
Okay, your daughter's a volleyball player where?
Youngstown State University.
Oh, that's cool. Speaking of which,
yeah.
Horizon League, by the way, based right here in Indy. And, I'll tell you, Tim, volleyball is amazing because, first off, they've got a professional team now here in Indy. That is a sport that you want to talk about like momentum. I would imagine and you tell me if I'm wrong here, I would imagine Tim Stratton gets more on edge and nervous watching volleyball than he ever did lining up as a football player.
Absolutely. And I actually was a volleyball player in Illinois. Coming out of high school, I was recruited to play football, basketball, and volleyball in college. And I ended up choosing football because, it just happened. But I love the sport. I love the fact my daughters were in it. My middle one is the one that's completely focused on it and really worked her butt off to get to a scholarship for college, and I'm just really proud of her.
So let's talk about what it was if you had those options, and you were part of Joe Tiller's first recruiting class at Purdue, if I'm not mistaken. What was it about Purdue initially and Joe Tiller that drew Tim Stratton out of Oak Brook, Illinois to West Lafayette?
The fact that Coach brought 8 of his coaches to my house. We sat around my parents' dining room table, and Coach was he asked me what I wanted to do or what I wanted to major in. I said history. He goes, all right, when was Purdue founded? And I had no clue when Purdue was founded because the only thing I knew about Purdue was Mike Allstott and maybe the astronauts. That was about the only thing I knew back then. Obviously no social media, and the games were ever on TV. It was always the Minnesota game that was like 58-48 or there were always high scoring games. So but the fact that they showed up, Coach Corpitz, the old quarterbacks coach that was supposed to come with, he passed away that summer before we got there. So 8 of the 9 assistants were there, and it really made a huge impact on me and my family, and just really fell in love with the offense and the potential. They knew I was obviously a 195-pound wide receiver in high school, but they said, listen, our tight end at Wyoming last year caught 80 balls. Do you want to be like that, or do you want to be a slow receiver somewhere else? I'm like, that's a good point. So it was a good selling point. It was also the fact that in the Big Ten at that time, there were a bunch of coaches coming in. And Coach Tiller was the only one that brought his entire staff with him. Everyone else was putting together their staffs, Cam Cameron at IU, Turner at Illinois, Mason at Minnesota. So the continuity for them coming in, I thought would be a huge benefit for myself and for the team.
My recollection of this, Tim, and this may be way off, and I want to get to some of your great games you had, and obviously catching balls from Drew Brees and Kyle Orton. I mean, both great quarterbacks. There's a lot to get to there, but my recollection, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I remember later in your career that you were kind of a guy that Joe Tiller always was kind of poking is the wrong word, but using as an example of areas that he wanted leadership and maturity out of, and that he pushed you harder than maybe other guys. But that's from an outside perspective. Was there any accuracy to my assumption there?
Yeah, there was some to it. I also was unfortunately immature and childish and kind of a creature of the moment. And so, not necessarily looking at long term, but more the short term and, instant gratification. And I guess now this younger generation, I guess I'm in the wrong generation. But, I wanted to have fun. And, we always had Drew to tell media what the school wanted them to hear. And then you had me that told the truth. So it was many tongue lashings from not only coach, but all my parents and, Timmy, would you just shut up? Like, just stop saying what you're saying. I'm like, well, I'm not lying, so it's, having a little bit of couth was not something I had back then. So
What was your relationship with Joe Tiller?
Coach and I got along great. I know publicly it didn't look like we did, but we actually got along great. I mean, I considered him and Jim Chaney as kind of like my other two dads and Coach Hope, to be honest with you. So but we got along great. We did have our moments where, publicly when I lost my helmet or, all that jazz with the Michigan game. We had a few little run-ins, I would say, but all in all, we got along great.
And by the way, because I do have to ask about it. So you guys beat Michigan. You climb up the goalpost, and then somebody swipes your helmet, right? Now, how all did this go down? For those that are unfamiliar with the story, enlighten us with the detail.
All right, so Travis makes the game-winning field goal. We win the game. Myself and Brandon Gorn, who's a Muncie native, we tried to go across the field to say hi to. I had a buddy from Chicago that was on Michigan, so I tried to go talk to him after the game. And Brandon wanted to go talk to one of his buddies, but the crowd rushed the field. By the time I lost track of Gorn, I didn't know where he went. So by the time I got to the north end zone goal, end zone, just sing the fight song with the band, the team was already gone. Like, they were ushered off the field. And so I was like, you know what? I thought all these kids were around me, and I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Let's go to the goalpost. And I handed my helmet to a kid in one of my classes because I recognized him from class. And apparently, so the kids were trying to lift me up, my full uniform. And he put the helmet down to help lift me up. And that's when another student swiped the helmet. And so after I got, hanging off the goalpost, I was hanging on the goalpost. Then I got crowd surfed to about the 50-yard line. And when I got down from that, I realized, I'm like, oh crap, my helmet's gone. This isn't going to go over well. Uh-huh. So I tried to usher, or quiet down the kids that are around me and just said, hey, $50 in a case of beer, whoever could find my helmet. And I swear to God, you saw every kid looking all over. It was pretty comical. And then by the time I got to the locker room, the team had already, coach already spoke. The team, most of the guys were showered and already out of the locker room. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I don't have my helmet. And so Sunday's practice, we would practice on Sundays and off on Mondays. I had a backup helmet that was, given to me. And Sunday night, I would write a diary for ABCSports.com that season. And so I wrote in the diary, or in the diary, I submitted it to our SID, who then submits it to SI, to publish it. And so I wrote in there, if anyone has any whereabouts of my helmet, I will give you the game ball from the Michigan game. And so we got all these calls. Back then we only had caller ID. That was the new thing back then. And so we got all these random calls from numbers that, we'd get in the car and drive over to, someone would say, oh, it's at this house, it's at that house. And like idiots, we just drove all over looking for it. And because Taylor had threatened to suspend me the following week against Northwestern, which for me was like a home game, back up here in Chicago. So Sunday practice, have the backup. Monday we're off. Tuesday I wear the backup helmet. Wednesday backup helmet. Thursday's practice, I get to the locker room and the backup helmet's gone. And I'm like, gosh, crap. I looked at Mitrione, I looked at Vinny, I looked at the usual suspects, right? Matt Light, I looked at the guys I know would mess with me. I'm like, who took it? And all of them were like, we didn't do it, we didn't take it. So I went to the manager, our equipment manager, Mike Shandrick, and I'm like, hey, Mikey, where's my other helmet? He's like, Coach told us to take it away. I'm like, all right. So Thursday's practice was like a shells practice where it's shoulder pad helmets and thigh boards. So I went out there in just my shoulder pads and my, shorts and thigh boards with no helmet, start getting in the stretch lines, and Tiller comes walking up to me like, hey, where's your helmet? I said, Coach, you know damn well where my helmet is. You had it taken away. He's like, I told you, if you don't get your helmet back, you're playing. And I said, Coach, that's BS. I said, Wonder Boy, which is my nickname for Drew, I said, Wonder Boy had his helmet taken 2 years ago after a bowl practice. No one said a word. But I'm the jerk that gets, his helmet taken, and I'm, now I'm the one being suspended. I go, that's not fair. I use some other words, but we're on public radio, so.
Thank you.
Yes, and so he's like, I didn't know about that. I'm like, Coach, everyone on campus knew about it. It is what it is. So lo and behold, my backup helmet comes out to the field. I put it on in practice, and then that night, one of our roommates answered the phone at like 1:45 in the morning. And Alex Tone from Fort Wayne, and he, some kid called from like a computer lab, Purdue University computer lab. That's how it popped up on the caller ID, which is smart on that kid's part because we were trying to track down whoever took it. And he just said, "Listen, can you please give Tim Stratton a message? Let him know his helmet is where he left it underneath the north end zone goalpost." So Alex said, "Sure." Hung up. The kid called back 15 minutes later to say, "Please, can you just repeat the message I need to give to Tim?" And Alex was like, "Sure, it's under the goalpost." Great. Hung up. Well, apparently the kid broke into the stadium, put the helmet underneath the north end zone goalpost where he found it, and it had a letter in it which stated, "Dear Mr. Stratton, I hope this helmet brings you as much pleasure as it's brought me these past few days," and something else. But my sick mind was just thinking, like, what did he do with it? And
right.
Yeah, I being an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid, that's immediately what I thought. And it turns out that he had also called Coach Tiller's office and left a message with Carlita, our secretary. And so the managers went in that morning, took the helmet apart, disinfected it, put it back together, and I was able to play the rest of the season with it. And now that helmet doesn't leave me.
So did you ever find out who the kid was? Did you give him a case of beer?
You know what? I did not. What I did, he sent like a couple buddies, or at least they claimed to be his friends, because they wanted the game ball from the Michigan game, because that was my reward. And so I ended up taking a practice ball and had a couple of the walk-ons, sign it and give it to the kid. Because I'm like, screw you, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not gonna,
okay, fair. All right.
If you're not going to be a man enough to like come and at least say, hey, it's my fault, I'm sorry. But it turns out that I found out from his friend that the kid, when he took the helmet, he went home. It was fall break that weekend, and he lived a couple hours away, so he gave the helmet to his little brother. And so it took him a couple days to get back to, grab it and bring it back to school. So that was the delay. But nonetheless, it was me being stupid. So
here's the thing, though. Look, and I get the fact that, like, now that we are adults, right, you got to look back and say, that was immature and whatever else. But let's be real here. In the moment, the crowd surfing had to be pretty awesome.
Oh, it was great. I mean, when I met with Tiller on Sunday, he called me into his office. He's like, hey, how did 100 guys get off the field with their helmet, and you're the only idiot that didn't? I go, Coach, I got, it was mobbed. The kids were all over. And he pulls up a picture of one of the newspapers, and it shows me crowd surfing, holding 2 Purdue flags, like, in my hands. And he's like, really? I go, all right, you got me. Like, my bad. So I couldn't lie my way out of that one. But I definitely tried.
Hey, what's your relationship now with, just your teammates in general? And, I think you were obviously kind of a fun-loving teammate, but, Drew Brees, for example, who you caught a lot of balls from, and you guys had a great on-field relationship. What's the relationship now, and who are you looking forward to seeing this weekend?
I'm looking forward to seeing all the guys. I still talk with, that recruiting class, we were Tiller's first class. Myself, Drew, Ben, Smith, Jason, Lorzell, Vinny, Mitrione. We had a real good group of guys. And I think what really, gelled with us was the fact that we were ranked the 10th out of the 11 Big Ten recruiting classes. And I think that motivated us to say, you know what, Tom Lemming, you don't know anything. All these other people, I don't even know back then who they were, but we're going to prove you wrong. We're going to come in and play this basketball on grass. And it was a fun group. We're all still really tight, which is good. I mean, we're all busy now with our own kids and everything else. But when we have an opportunity to get together, it sure is nice to see everyone.
Tim Stratton, our guest, the tight end who was the inaugural winner of the John Mackey Award, given out to college football's best tight end. The reigning owner of that title is Tyler Warren, who is with the Colts and will be with them Sunday against the Broncos at Lucas Oil Stadium. He won the award last year at Penn State. How much, Tim, do you follow still college football and, for that matter, the NFL today? And if so, your impressions of Tyler Warren?
Oh, I think he's a hell of a player. I actually am on the voting committee for the Mackey Award, so he was definitely my top pick. Him and then Colston Loveland, the Bears tight end now. But I really enjoyed watching Tyler play. Ironically, my fifth year at Purdue, when I stayed for my fifth year, I was the third-string quarterback. So if the two freshmen went down, Brandon Hance and Kyle Orton, I was the emergency quarterback. So it was because I knew the offense and I could throw the ball. So it was kind of a irony that our latest winner could play quarterback, running back. I mean, he could do it all. He's just a hell of an athlete. And I'm happy the Colts took him, and I think he's going to have a great NFL career.
Yeah, he's a heck of a player. And you're right. You love any guy. I mean, Tim Stratton, he is an old school dude. I mean, Shane Steichen said just an old school baller. And you got to kind of see a little of yourself in that, like you just talked about, right? Just the ability to be versatile like that. It really does feel throwback, doesn't it?
It does. And it's great. It was really fun to watch him play. He was definitely a difference maker for Penn State, and I think he's going to do wonderful things for the Colts.
Okay, lastly, for this game, Purdue and USC, you often watch, I know you said, you've got your daughter playing at Youngstown State, and you got kids, and you got a lot going on, but for Purdue football, just your overall impressions or what you would like to see other than the obvious, which is a win against USC in what is now a new era for Purdue football.
It's crazy to me that this is considered a Big Ten game, to be honest, number one, because we played them in '98 in the Kickoff Classic out at the Coliseum, and so it's just so weird for it. But nonetheless, I think I hope it's going to be a great game. I'm hoping I know offensively their first two games, I think they're one of the highest averaging offenses in the country right now, scoring-wise. I'm really hoping that the Purdue defense can stifle their offense, and I'd like to see Ryan Brown throw the ball more. I'd like to see the tight ends be more involved in the offense. And then Devin Mockabee, I think, is he could be a difference maker tomorrow, depending on how our offensive line performs.
By the way, since you guys played in the Rose Bowl, I mean, you mentioned playing at USC, then obviously you play Washington in the Rose Bowl. That's what you guys are going to be honored for coming up tomorrow. I just went to the Rose Bowl, not for a football game. I went to a concert there last weekend. And I had never been in the Rose Bowl. I mean, obviously the Rose Bowl is so iconic. And I mentioned this, and I want you, Tim Stratton, to basically to have my back here. Fabulous venue, historic, beautiful setting, beautiful sunset, beautiful mountains in the background. Terrible. And I know you were on the field and you were not up in the stands, but maybe like friends or family told you this. Presumably everybody when that stadium was built was 5'6" and 110 pounds. That is the most cramped dump ever.
I believe it. Yeah, my family did say that. I mean, I'm the biggest in my family, but my brothers that were there, my sister, my uncles, they're all about 6 feet tall. So, but they did say that. I thought the stadium was cool from obviously the field perspective. I wish our outcome could have been a lot different, and we would have thrown the ball a hell of a lot more than we did. But it was really, and our Purdue fans traveled so well. I mean, they are I mean, I still get people that I run into from work that are like, we were at the Rose Bowl. I mean, there was huge rallies there. There were so many fans out there. And what's funny is a lot of people in like the LA area or where, Pasadena area thought Purdue was an Ivy League school. They literally, the guys would go out and, maybe have a drink or something, and the bartenders would be like, are you an Ivy League school? Like, what are you doing out here? And we're like, no, we're Big Ten, but obviously nobody from Purdue's been out here since 1967. So, but it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. I wish I wouldn't have snapped the ball over the punter's head the one time, but other than that, it was fun.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Tim Stratton, listen, soak it all in. Have fun this weekend. If they beat USC, feel free to climb the goalpost. Crowd surf, do whatever you want to do, right?
Yeah, this time, though, I might get arrested, so I don't know if that's worth it, but who knows? Maybe the Purdue cops will be nice.
By the way, do you know what year Purdue was founded?
Was it 1868, I think?
I'm looking this up. Ooh.
I know, 1889? I can't remember.
1869. Basically, I'm going to give it to you. That's good. May 6th of 1869, right? And I'm sure you probably looked that up after. Of course, you couldn't Google it when Joe Tiller came in, but nonetheless, you know what I mean?
No, gosh, no. That's. But Coach loved to, like I said, if you said you wanted to do something or you were going to do something, he'd call you out on it. So, which I appreciated everything he said, even though at the time I didn't. As an adult and as a parent, as a coach, I appreciate everything that all the coaches, taught us. And so I try to use that when with parenting, with coaching, with everyday life.
What do you do now, by the way? You mentioned coaching. What is life like for Tim Stratton now?
I used to coach high school football. I coached Division III football for a couple of years. Then I coached high school. Then I went to grade school when my nephews were playing. Then I went back to high school, and then now I've stopped because my kids got busy. So I like to actually go watch my own kids. And then I've also I'm a director of business development for an electrical contracting firm up here in Chicago. And so I used to have a little more freedom with coaching, but now that I decided to step away and actually watch my own kids, I miss it, but I don't miss it because I think the generations are a little different now. Meaning my personality and coaching personality is more like how I was coached versus how these kids are now.
Totally different era. Yes, that is correct.
Totally my gosh. I'm not afraid to call a kid out in front of people. And a lot of these kids, they can't take that anymore. The kids that want to do well and want to excel, they accept it and know it's not meant from any other purpose of, trying to hurt them. It's trying to help them improve. But you got a lot of these parents that are living vicariously through their kids, so they want to be involved in everything. So
trust me, I totally get it.
Yep.
Tim, we appreciate it, man. Boiler up and enjoy it this weekend. All right.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you having me on.
All right, Tim Stratton joining us on the program. Awesome. Speaking of Purdue, by the way, it is a Franciscan Health Feel Good for the Heart Friday, and something that relates to your Indianapolis Colts, something that relates to something you're going to see all season long, something that relates to paying tribute to the owner of the Colts and Jim Irsay, and something he was passionate about. And it involves Purdue as well. We'll do all of it next. It is, of course, a Friday, bottom of the 2 o'clock hour. That means it is a Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. Reminder that I will get to about the importance of a $49 non-invasive heart scan. I mentioned yesterday I had a cardiac stress test. So heart health, very important to me. And along with getting everybody that information and talking about the importance and the appreciation for Franciscan in partnering with that message, we also find stories that simply make you feel good. And this one is one that obviously has a difficult beginning to the story in the loss of Jim Irsay. And Jim Irsay, we know philanthropically what he meant to the city of Indianapolis, what he meant to the football community. And in addition to that, you know, he was a guy that I think was kind of a stranger to no one, not because he was famous, but because I think that even though as a billionaire NFL owner, he put himself out there in areas that were relatable to the casual fan, the diehard fan, or even the non-football fan because of his interests outside of football. And one of those interests, of course, was music and his vast guitar collection. He also has drums that belong to the Beatles. But there was an effort that was put into place in terms of this season being dedicated to Jim Irsay, in the win for Jim, if you will, over the course of the season, messaging taking place for the Colts. And Shane Steichen had an idea about how to not only pay tribute to Jim Irsay, but also to allow his team to have something to aspire for or towards in that delivery of message. And joining me now on the program, a couple of guys that were a part of that. And it is odd to think that the Indianapolis Colts and Shane Steichen, a guy who had been a quarterback at UNLV, would have something that they would do each and every week to pay tribute to their owner, and they would do so by way of the work of a couple of guys at Purdue University. But joining me now on the program, one of them is a professor at Purdue. Mark French joins me, and he is joined by an alum in Noah Scott. And I will bring first Mark into the program. Mark, you're a guy, if I'm not mistaken, that basically just sits around and puts together wooden strings and makes guitars, right? Is it that simple?
Well, I do some other stuff too, but yeah, that's what happened in this case, yeah.
Okay, so let's begin with this, Mark. You are up at Purdue, and essentially it is the guitar lab at Purdue, and I'm sure that the simplicity of music that comes from a guitar probably does have, there's a lot more to it than that. There's an engineering aspect of it, but take me through, first off, just the guitar lab and then how it came to be that you would be connected with the Indianapolis Colts.
Well, the guitar lab's been around for, almost 20 years now, and it's a place where we teach students product design and manufacturing using guitars. And it's had a couple of different homes. Right now it's in a brand new building, and it looks great. It's a really nice place. The way I came to be involved in this project is that Noah had some contacts with the Colts, and we'd actually gone down to see the Irsay collection, my students and I, courtesy of Noah, and it was last year. And so when the Colts decided they wanted this guitar, they contacted Noah, and then Noah talked me into it, basically.
Okay, so Noah, let's grab Noah here on the line. Noah Scott is an alum at Purdue University. Mark just mentioned, Noah, your connection to the Colts and where this came about, that basically what we have is that each and every game, at the end of the game, Shane Steichen will present the Win for Jim guitar to a player of the game who will then present that guitar for fans to see, like at the next home game, and place it where it needs to be. And each player can, of course, aspire to being awarded this symbol, if you will, for Jim Irsay. How, Noah Scott, for you, did this come about from who was the first person to come up with this idea? And then how did you say, let me get a hold of Mark and let's get going?
Yeah, so this was a rainy day in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the Raleigh-Durham Airport. My flight just got canceled, and I see a call come in from a gentleman named Larry Hall, who was the head of the Jim Irsay collection up until just this summer. And back when myself and Mark and the students in the lab first visited, that all came about because I called Larry at the Colts, and he said, hey, why don't you go ahead and bring the students down, and I'll give you guys a background tour. And that was such a great experience. And he was so jazzed about the lab that when he gave me a call at the airport, he said, Noah, this idea came up. We thought you guys first of mind. What do you think? I said, Larry, my flight just got canceled. Let me give Mark a call, and we'll try to balance this all together. And gave Mark a call, and in between rescheduling my flight, Mark said, that's great. I don't know who Peyton Manning is, but we'll do it. So that's how it's going to be.
Okay. Well, so here's the thing. Guitars, that's the important thing, right? Now, so the question is this, Noah, in terms of the specifications of this guitar, the Win for Jim guitar, did the Colts give you carte blanche of, hey, you've seen the Irsay guitar collection, you just come up with what you think he would like, or did they say we want it to look exactly like this, etc.? What goes into the creativity, if you will, and then the finished product?
Sure. So Coach Steichen had kind of a good idea of what he would like the guitar to be, sent that over, and as with a lot of things in life, there had to be some changes and modifications made to make sure that it would kind of get to the spirit of what he was looking for. And so we worked back and forth with him, and the guitar design at the end of the day was a combination of his idea and Mark and I's ability to make it happen in real life.
Okay, let me talk to Mark real quick. Mark French, again, with Purdue University as well in the guitar lab, and then we'll get back to Noah. But, Mark, I wanted to ask you this. And it is a very cool guitar. It is a blue guitar. It is essentially like an electric guitar with the blue horseshoe down in the bottom left. It says Win for Jim on it. When you had seen, Mark, the Jim Irsay guitar collection, first off, just from the standpoint of world collections of music, I would assume that is one that is as high on the list as any in terms of the unique individual collection. But also, was there inspiration perhaps from some of the guitars you had seen that Jim Irsay owned in kind of the vision as well of what you wanted this one to be?
Well, yeah. The guitars we saw, it's not there aren't a whole lot of guitars in the collection, but they are very unique. They're important instruments, and that's what makes the collection so valuable and so unique. The guitar they wanted was actually a fairly basic design. It would be similar to the kinds of guitars that were there in the early days of rock and roll. So the older instruments in his collection would be the ones we were kind of drawing on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now the question then, Mark. No, hold on. Did he say, Mark, that you didn't know who Peyton Manning was? That's he's ribbing you there, right?
No. I'm afraid he's not. I really didn't know who Peyton Manning was. I'm sorry.
I love.
I know
you know
now.
What? That,
I know
my
now.
friend. Let me tell you something, Mark. That's a guy dedicated to his craft. That means that you literally are stuck in the lab. I love it, right? I mean, that's what I take from that. Noah, I wanted to ask you another thing about this. Noah Scott, who is a Purdue alum and was part of this project, the Win for Jim guitar that was put together at the Purdue University Guitar Lab. Noah, when you go into the building of a guitar and the creation and the engineering of a guitar and all of that goes into it, I would imagine that you're an artist, and you're an artist that's putting together a piece of art, and art is to be displayed by more than just the artists themselves. But what amount of pride is there, not just for Purdue, but for you guys in general, to be able to see that you were able to contribute to somebody that was able to bring together the symbolism of the passion as well as their sport?
Yeah. I mean, candidly, it means the world, because to a certain extent, a lot of people will see this guitar and hear the name of the Purdue Guitar Lab. And it was on Mark and I's shoulders to make sure that impression not only honored Jim Irsay, but honored the work of students here at Purdue and Purdue at large, because it carries the Purdue name and the lab's name. And so you kind of walk the balance of making sure that you fulfill anything and everything that could possibly be done to bring his memory to life in this special way, and also represent the history and passion of the students here at Purdue.
Noah, what does the long-term vision for the guitar, obviously for this year, and maybe it's beyond this year, but Shane Steichen will present it. DeForest Buckner was the first recipient, by the way, of the honorary Jim Irsay guitar. after this season with the win for Jim season, then the guitar will ultimately be displayed where, or is this something now that has no in date in terms of its role?
That's a great question. I would assume for Coach Steichen and whatnot. Our task ended the day we handed off the guitar, and it's taken on a life of its own. So just as you all will, we look forward to seeing where it goes from here.
Guys, we appreciate it. Mark French and Noah Scott from Purdue University and the Guitar Lab putting together the Shane Steichen and, of course, Carly Ursay Gordon, the daughters, and as well Pete Ward was a big part of it as well, the Indianapolis Colts, and Larry Hall, the win for Jim guitar. Guys, appreciate it very much, and we shall see who it is this weekend that is the one that gets that award from Shane Steichen, and it will pull on the heartstrings, I can promise you, of the team and the daughters, especially when they are in the locker room after the game, and Purdue giving their contribution to it. Speaking of hearts and heartstrings, just a reminder again, folks, the #1 heart program in Indiana for cardiology by Health Grades. #1 in Indiana for interventional coronary care and major cardiac surgery by CareChex is Franciscan Health. And it is so important, the ability to get that $49 heart screen you can pay out of pocket. It is a way to get just an idea with your heart. You get a heart health risk assessment with it. And I was 48 years old when I had a heart attack. And so you think to yourself, well, that's old guy stuff. I mean, 48's old, granted, but you get what I'm saying there. You can never be too early in being aware of your heart health, especially if you have a history within your family of heart health or cardiovascular disease, if you are a former or current smoker, if you've had battles with obesity or diabetes. Those are risk elements as well. But it is so important to make sure that you're on top of it. You can always find out more at franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. That's franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. Or you can call 833-238-0688. That's 833-238-0688. As always, you can text me anytime, 24/7, to ask me the questions about heart health, and I will happily get back to you and make sure that we can get you in touch with Franciscan. All right, Colts and Broncos coming up Sunday. We'll hand it off to John as part of our crossover with Love Heating and Air. He is at Coach's downtown, and we will get you our predictions and prognostication. See, I said it right that time, for the game as well next. Colts and Broncos coming up Sunday, Lucas Oil Stadium. Talked about it earlier. I think when you look at Denver defensively, they like to blitz. And the Colts actually fared well against the blitz with Miami, but different looks perhaps. And I think Tyler Warren again becomes important to establish early and get things going. But we will get our predictions coming up in just a minute. Do we have John, by the way, Eddie? The crossover, of course, as we get set to hand it off to JMV, who will be with you coming up at 3 o'clock, brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com, 317-353-2141. And, John, you are at one of our favorite places downtown at Coach's to get everybody set for what's going to be a big showdown coming up on Sunday.
Jake, it is me and Tommy. Yes, I think Chris Hagan is going to be here, so that should be exciting. And one hell of a day. And got to remind everybody, too, we have Broncos Colts tickets to give away with Zinc and our friends at Bud Light. And we want you here to win those. But also remember that we're going to start up Colts Happy Hour with me and then get into the IU football pregame with Don, because Indiana State and IU in Bloomington on a Friday night on the Fan later on tonight. So we've got a lot to get to. As Jerry Reed famously said, we've got a lot to do in a short time to do it. That's kind of what he said, right? And he's mounted down, right? I got a lot of blank to do and not a lot of time to do it. So let's do it right here at Coach's Tavern.
Okay,
yes.
I want to ask you this, John. Indiana State and Indiana tonight at Memorial Stadium. An odd Friday, not odd, but this couple of times they've done this now on a Friday night. But it's a 46.5-point spread. I think Indiana State covers. Your thoughts?
I would hope they would cover. I think that this is like tuned up for, a 52-0. If they score, they cover, right?
I mean, that's what I mean, right?
They absolutely cover. Yeah.
They might need 10. They might need 10, but yes, I think they cover then.
Let me tell you what they have covered, however. The spread of finances with $550,000 for a trek down 46 and back for the Sycamore program that just can't live on my 75 cents a month that I give them in Terre Haute. So you've got to do more. $550K. Right. $550K is a nice round number. Listen, and a shout out to Kurt Mallory. We both like the Mallory family, Jake, a great deal. Kurt is really good people, a really good coach, and that is this is not breaking news here, an absolutely impossible job to try to navigate, and he has done it to the absolute best of his ability. It is impossible to do. It is tough. It really is.
John will be with you coming up.
Yes.
Indiana State talk, but a lot of Colts Broncos talk as well. Hagan will be there, and a chance to win tickets with Zinc and Bud Light if you are there at Coach's to see John between now and you'll be there. How late today, John?
We'll be here. I'll be here until probably around 7. Now, are we going to be on? Because yesterday they took us down, I think. I don't think there was any AAA membership lounge or any chat room going on. Is it back today? Do we know, Jake?
Eddie,
is it back for you?
Eddie gives a very coy thumbs up, so you're good to go.
People really like watching me drink. I've learned this, so that's cool.
All right, and believe me, rare opportunity to do so. All right.
Yes.
Yes, John, have fun. Have a great weekend. I'll see you on Sunday. All right.
You got it, brother.
J&V is up next. We will be back with you at noon on Monday, recapping Colts and Broncos. But Eddie, your score prediction is?
I think I went Colts 23, Broncos 20.
Oh, man, that's pretty tough to 24-16 Colts win. I don't know. The Broncos will get more points than that, right? 24-21, you try to come up with unusual numbers, but I do think the Colts will win on Sunday. Big key is going to be watching that blitz and being ready for it. But we will discuss it either way. We'll do so at noon on Monday. I thank you for listening to Query & Company.